Hey guys, and welcome back to Connor Reads. Today I'm doing part 2 of the Lords of Chaos in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series. So today there's going to be spoilers from the outset and throughout. What I'm going to do is I'm essentially just going to run through what's happened, my reaction to it, and then my predictions moving forward. So let's jump into it. So we just left Rand's perspective. I'm coming up on chapter 10, and I know we're about to go back to Rand's perspective, so I know now is the right time to do a video. We jumped between 4 or 5 different storylines during that period of time, and the first one was Matt's, which I was really excited about. Honestly, I think that this chapter is an absolute masterpiece. It manages to show the juxtaposition between who Matt was and who he's becoming so well. So we join him in a tavern, which is where, where else are we going to join Matt? And there's singing, there's gambling, there's dancing, there's drinking. And, we think it's going to be, the old Matt back to his old tricks. But no, things are so different. And that's where the juxtaposition comes in. Matt obviously has these great men and women living inside of his head. Well, not so much living in his head, but he has their memories and can draw on those. He dances with people, he controls his men and has his army doing exactly what it needs to do based on all of the skills and ability he has inside of his head. The chapter is an absolute beauty. It's a masterpiece, and I actually read it twice because of just how fun it was to read. So as we're coming through this chapter, we understand that actually Matt has timed things perfectly. His guys are going to be sneaking an attack on Samael's forces, and it's beautiful, it's epic, it's perfectly written, and then it's completely over because we only get one chapter from Matt's perspective, which is so frustrated. A couple of things to dissect in this chapter. Number one, something that was really funny to me is Matt's dancing with a working girl who works at the tavern, and he's dancing with her. And he's just, deep in thought as he's dancing these moves that he's got from the memory of somebody else. And then he thinks to just ask her, what do you know about the daughter of the Nine Moons? Which really made me laugh because that's a proper old school Matt move where he's just like, let me just ask this person in front of me. Obviously he doesn't know anything about it, but yeah, made me laugh. He's also quite pensive over the predictions that those individuals through the Terangriel, I think the first time he went, gave him. The first prediction was that he's going to have to give up half the light of the world to save the world. And I was trying to figure out what this could mean, and I had a couple of theories. The first one was like, maybe he'll have the choice or the power to give up half of the power, like either the male half or the female half. And like that would kind of make sense. The second, if I'm looking at it from a literal point of view, would be half of the light that I get or that Matt gets is, if I lost an eye, then half of the light would be gone. But, doesn't really seem like a fair trade to just trade my eye or his eye for, the world from whoever was making the trade's point of view. So, less likely, but that was the only real literal sense that I could take from it. Another idea I had was maybe the moon or the sun. They haven't really been mentioned as powers or anything like that. Obviously, the sun is really important, and the moon, really the only light it gives off is the reflection from the sun. So, I think I'm reaching here. But my last thought was similar to the first one, is maybe it's one of those big Terangriel, the statues where they're holding the crystal ball, and I know there's a male and a female one, and maybe they do represent like the male and female sources of the power, because I know they're supposed to be the two most powerful Terangriel. So, or Sangangriel, I believe, whichever type of Angriel they are. So maybe it's one of them, but that kind of is the same as the first one. So I don't know, seems like foreshadowing for something a long way off, but those are my ideas so far. And really this whole chapter is about showing us how far Matt's developed and that he's a completely different person, and it did that really, really well. My prediction for Matt moving forwards is I think there's going to be more juxtaposition. There's going to be a lot more examples of like old Matt and new Matt like linking together and joining together. And what I mean by that is there'll be examples where he's a great leader of men and a general and super knowledgeable, and then he'll make some silly mistakes and silly comments as well, which is going to be really fun to read. If he could just chain some Matt chapters together for me, I would be eternally grateful. And as I've been predicting for a long time for Matt, I would like him to go to the Sean Chan. Everything suggests that they're going to come to us, but I think it'll be such a cool adventure to have him go and do his own thing, and we might get not necessarily that trip to the Sean Chan's homeland, because I think that's where the daughter of the Nine Moons will be. But you know, just something where he's on his own. But we might get something on his own this time round, because Rand isn't actually physically with him, and it seems like Rand is going to maybe do his own magical adventure this time round. So you know, hopefully we get more of Matt making decisions and going out there and making things happen. The next line of storyline was essentially all around the Forsaken, and it's been so much fun. These characters are so knowledgeable, old, have connections, and really just powerful, that they're always so fun to read about. Our first interaction is with Graendal and Samael. Samael goes to visit Graendal in her like palace, and one thing that's really cool is we learn a little bit about the people from the other side of the Blight, and this is really like a battle of wits. I think Samael is more like he's obviously evil, but he's more like a stand-up guy. He seems a bit more obvious and direct and bullheaded, and he thinks that he's seeing through Graendal's, you know, facade and where she's trying to point him. But Graendal actually turns out to be a lot more intelligent, a lot more, you know, secretive and sneaky and twisted and just underhanded and cunning. And she manages to actually send Samael off in the direction that she wants him to go, even though he believed he could see through everything. So, you know, that was a really interesting battle of wits and cunning and conversation. Another reason why it was interesting was because it sounds like, well, definitely Graendal was the one who helped Samael like swear in to becoming one of the Chosen or Forsaken, and that means maybe she was the very first one, which, you know, interests me about her. I'd love to hear a bit about that origin, and I'm sure we will, like how the Dark One recruited these people and got them together and decided how many of the Chosen he was going to have and what they needed to do to qualify to be one of them. Something else that was really interesting, and I'm going to be, you know, cautious with how I word this because I want this to be like a family friendly channel that people can watch, but she's kind of erotic in the way like she gets like powerful people and has to have like a certain type of power over them, and the way they dress or lack of, you know, and that made it really fun and interesting to read. The next Forsaken that we come across has a name that I just looked up and it's really difficult to pronounce. Semirhage. Semirhage's healing ability is definitely something that Nynaeve would find really interesting. Now, obviously, they're not going to link up, but maybe if Nynaeve could get an adem around Semirhage's neck, she could question her for all of her healing ability, because she was self-professed as like the best healer that is still alive today. So that would be really interesting. And Semirhage is absolutely terrifying. Like, there's a torture scene where she finds the pain nodes in someone's head, or pain receptors, and essentially just sets, you know, about attacking those. And I thought, wow, that's a horrible way to torture someone. But then she does the same thing to their warder, with the pleasure nodes, and it drives him insane super quickly. And I was like, wow, out of all of them, this is the one I'd least like to be tortured by. And then we briefly had Demandred as well. So my predictions for the Forsaken: I think Graendal survives this book. She seems way too tricky and in control right now. Samael does not survive this book. And the reason for that is he's angry. So his anger is definitely clouding his judgment. He has a clear hatred for Lews Therin. And Rand has already got a grudge match against him. So, you know, I feel like we can't dead off like 4 or 5 Forsaken this time round. We're too early in the series. So I think Samael's the one who's got to go. I think Semirhage doesn't really get involved in the storyline too much. Maybe she goes out there and captures another Aes Sedai or two. Maybe even one we know. Maybe some of them in Salidar, or maybe Verin, who's in Two Rivers. And, you know, side note, it's been so long since we've been there for any number of chapters that I can't even remember what's going on. Hopefully we get back over there at some point. But yeah, I don't think she's going to feature too heavily. I think we're just previewing her. And then one thing Demandred said was... he said, essentially, let me find it. So he says, let the Lord of Chaos rule, but wondered why it had to be so. And if the Dark One is the Lord of Chaos, I don't think he would wonder why it had to be so, because he would know why. So he would know why. Is Rand the Lord of Chaos, or is somebody else the Lord of Chaos? I feel like it has to be Rand. I mean, a lot of chaotic things are happening because of his rise. There's famine, there's poverty, there's war, there's betrayal, backstabbing, schisms, splits, anger. You know, there's so much that's happening because of it. So maybe this is another name for the dragon that we don't know about. And realistically, like, sometimes you do have to commit atrocities and cause chaos to, you know, win wars where you can then give peace. So I don't know. I suppose my prediction is that is Rand the Lord of Chaos? I could see it happening maybe. Yes, I'm gonna go with it. Then we move on to Salidar with the Aes Sedai. We get some Elaine and we get some Nynaeve. First thing I want to say, and I don't want to offend anyone because I know so many people love the Aes Sedai. Like, I see you guys comment, and a lot of you guys have got your names as, you know, Aes Sedai. And some of them are great, but as a whole, the pride and the ego that these people have makes them so unlikable and frustrating to read about. Like, almost all the ones in Salidar I pretty much hate because of their pride and ego, and obviously the ones in the tower as well. It just seems like, you know, there's a huge pedestal they're on, and they would be so much more effective if they could come off it. Moiraine, for example, she was off the pedestal. She was like, I'm down for whatever, we're going to do whatever it takes to win, and that means I have to pull my ego out of the situation. And I loved her. She was awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to get that off my chest. They were absolutely humbled in Tel'aran'rhiod, and that was so fun to read. I'm a massive fan of that section of the story. And the other big thing that happened was we had some perspective from Nynaeve, and it wasn't very long, but like I picked out so many important things I think from there. So number one, Nynaeve feels like there's a storm breaking, and obviously this is one of the powers of the wisdoms, right? But there is no storm breaking physically, and what that means is that there is like a, you know, a hypothetical storm breaking, maybe in like events and things happening around her. And they make a big show of someone asking Nynaeve in this chapter, you know, what was your tell, or what was your thing that you could do while you were a wilder? And she says, you know, I can heal people. But I think maybe she can foretell a little bit. Maybe she can sense what's going to happen like in the future. Not in the same way Min can, because that's like a real premonition. But, you know, maybe she has a little bit of the foretelling inside of her, which I know is something that some Aes Sedai used to be able to do. And the second thing is, Morgaze, she asks Nynaeve in like a flippant comment. She says, you know, unless you found a way to heal him, talking about Logain. But she means it, I think, because she looks at her intently, and when Nynaeve is like, no, then she like relaxes a little bit. I think Morgaze knows that at least the men who've been stilled or severed can be healed, because Logain's not going to be any kind of king, which Min foresaw with the crown in his current state. He's just not. So I think he can be healed. My prediction is that he does get healed somehow, and Nynaeve figures out how to do it, because I think that's what that couple of lines was supposed to be telling me and foreshadowing. And I might be miles off, and when I watch this back it'll be embarrassing, but I'm convinced. So that's my prediction. I also predict that Morgaze is going to escape. I feel like it's going to happen. I feel like she's going to escape, and that whole storyline needs to progress. Well, now we have an emissary from the White Tower has come across, and I think there's more foreshadowing that Elaine will be the Amyrlin seat, because she just gets the Aes Sedai. She's convinced some of them would, you know, go back to the tower if the right terms were given. So, you know, I think that storyline will finally progress. But the Aes Sedai, they're so slow at progressing storylines, and so uppity and egotistical that, you know, I just want something to happen in that storyline now. Final section is the Whitecloaks. We get some from Pedro Niall's perspective, some from Morgaze's perspective. And I have to say, Pedro Niall is probably the most intelligent and cunning player of the Game of Houses out of anyone I've read. He's a very, very intelligent person, and he does all of this without any help channeling or from the true power. So, you know, I have to take my hat off to him. However, I do think we are going to see a new Lord Commander of the Whitecloaks, because if somebody can see what, you know, a great position that is, if they can cut the head off the Whitecloaks, which is Pedro Niall, and instill themselves, you know, maybe a Forsaken, maybe Padan Fain, because he had some association and would maybe find it quite simple to convince them, or I don't know, maybe Galad, like who knows. But I just feel like someone else will be Lord Commander within a couple of books. I also think we're going to see Elaine's wrath. I think that she's so cool, calm, and collected that when she finds out what happened to her mother, she is going to unleash some wrath on somebody, and it's going to be really fun to watch. I'd love to see that triple threat come together of Galad, Gawain, and Elaine, but I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. But those three together, like unified and united, would be so fun to watch, like a proper like brother sister. Maybe vengeance, I don't know, but yeah, I'd love to see that. And it kind of leaves, it seems like Morgaze is going to give in to Pedro Niall because she needs an army. She believes that maybe Rand is mistreating her people, so she's going to head over there, and they're kind of going to be set against each other. I'm hoping what happens is Elaine comes into that scenario and they're able to cut the head off of the Whitecloaks, which is Pedro and Niall, and maybe they put Galad in there as the head of the Whitecloaks, which would probably be like a really dumb move. On paper it looks good because, you know, he's related to them, so it should be an ally. But obviously he has that thing where he just does whatever he thinks is right, and it's to a fault as well. So, you know, my prediction is that there's going to be a mix up there, and hopefully they're not going to be, you know, hopefully they can see eye to eye, Morgaze and Randu, before any kind of war breaks out in that section. So yeah, that's my predictions for that section. And that's everything I got so far. Like, I really appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully I'm entertaining you guys with these thoughts and theories. I love any comments you have, and then as always, like and subscribe. And you know, these are going to be coming pretty quick because I'm absolutely loving this book. So stay tuned, and I'll be back in a day or two with part 3. Have a great day.